If there's a phone right now that's capable of going up against Tecno's Camon 20 Pro 5G, it is this Infinix Note 30 VIP. It is 2,000 peso more expensive, but it's also 2,000 peso better in most ways than you could imagine. After spending a few weeks with this phone as my main phone, mostly as a gaming phone, there are a few things I really love here. Some things I don't, more on that later, and a big potential from a company that's just starting to make a mark in the competitive world of smartphones. So, we all know that the smartphone market is a competitive world. We have seen old and new manufacturers come and go. But Infinix has threaded the wavy water with some good anchors to keep them afloat and steady. And right now, their biggest anchor in the affordable mid-range market is the Note 30 VIP. So it's got all the bells and whistles from a mid-range phone, glass build, 108 megapixel camera, stereo speakers that are tuned by JBL, that without throwing out the headphone jack, and a large battery capacity that supports 68-watt wired charging and bypass charging. But did you know that this phone is the cheapest mid-range phone with wireless charging capability? Not only that, it's up to 50 watts of wireless charging, a feature that's usually reserved for flagship phones. And Infinix made the package even sweeter by bundling a free 15-watt wireless charger in the box. It's an all-plastic charger, nothing fancy, but it works very well and it does its purpose well. But there's a catch, I must say. While you do have the luxury of 50 watts wireless here, you would have to find a compatible 50-watt wireless charger because Infinix doesn't sell one at the moment. And I've seen other reviewers charge this phone with a 50-watt wireless charger from Xiaomi and it didn't work. However, 68 watts wired charging is great. It gets you to 100% from zero in just 15 minutes. And since this is a 5000 mAh battery phone, you do have the option to reverse wireless charge any device you have. But for the battery life, I've been getting very good battery life with this phone. Recently, my phone habit has changed from moderate use to heavy use thanks in part to my addiction to Honkai Star Rail. So even playing more than an hour and a half every day, I still average 5 hours of screen time. You can push that number to 7 hours if you don't play a lot and just watch videos that don't consume a lot of power, so overall the battery has been great. Infinix also claims that after 1000 regular cycles of use, the battery would still retain over 80% of its effective charging capacity. For context, smartphones usually range between 500 to 800 before it significantly degrades, so seeing Infinix go beyond is a good thing for us consumers. But lastly, we now have bypass charging. Infinix is really aiming at gamers at this price point as they have included a way to bypass the battery to preserve the lifespan of the battery and send the electricity directly to the motherboard while in the game. Now that's good and all, but I've read that this would make the temperature of the battery lower. However, my testing showed no difference in both CPU and battery temperature as I was still reaching 40 to 44 degrees Celsius regardless of the feature. This kind of brings me to the performance of the Dimensity 8050 that's paired with 12GB of RAM, probably the largest RAM you would ever get on a mid-range phone. There's a lot of headroom here considering the price of this phone, so I expect the performance here to age well after 2 to 3 years. It's definitely not the best chip for gaming at this price point. That still belongs to the Poco X4 GT with Dimensity 8100, but the day-to-day performance here is great regardless. I've bashed Infinix in the past and I'm so glad that XOS has improved since then. XOS 13 based on Android 13 has given me a smooth experience throughout my use, whether that's playing back a 4K video on YouTube or switching to another app when I'm coming from a heavy game app. In some ways, this is better than MIUI. Frame drops are less frequent, but there is some room for improvement, definitely. Actually, there are several things. For one, the auto brightness sensor is too sensitive. It dims the screen way low when it detects the shadow of your hands in landscape mode. Second, the notification cutout is kinda weird. Third, the activation of bypass charging is confusing, so you would think that the feature is found under battery settings. However, it's a dedicated feature found under special function, then under game mode. After that, you need to go to game management and select the games you want the game mode to work on because bypass charging only works via a sidebar. Once you're done with those things, bring up the sidebar and toggle on bypass charging. No wonder a lot of users were asking how to activate bypass charging because there are quirks involved just to turn on this feature. Also, I'm not sure whether this is an app or Infinix problem, but at random times, Facebook Messenger would just fail to load images and chats, and the only way to fix it is by reinstalling or clearing the data of the app. It happened at least 3 times, and it only happened with his phone. As for the Facebook app itself, it refused to open anything related to links. Again, a reinstallation fixed it for me. There's definitely a lot to love here, but there are several things that need improving as well. I hope Infinix hears this and, like the last time, improves upon this software experience. Oh, and lastly, I have been asked a lot regarding the software support of this phone. And all I can say is that Infinix doesn't have the same level of commitment as other established brands, which is understandable. But I think it's just interesting to see that more and more consumers are starting to realize the importance of promised software updates. But let me talk about the cameras, or rather the 108 megapixel camera, because the other two cameras are practically useless 2 megapixel sensors. There is no ultra-wide, which is one of the downsides of owning a mid-range phone from Infinix, but the 108 megapixel camera shoots good looking images. I think the hardware has done its best to give you detailed looking images without looking over sharpened. And I also like the strong bokeh or background separation you get, especially when it's close-up subjects. The software processing of Infinix here leans towards the slightly saturated and brightened side, but the colors look natural more often than not. But for a 108 megapixel sensor, the 2x digital crop isn't as sharp as I wanted, and the 108 megapixel mode has a weird green tinting output, which is, well, weird because that's not supposed to happen. The camera can preserve a good amount of detail in challenging lighting, and the low light capability is definitely better than most, including the Camon 20 Pro 5G. The Note 30 VIP struggled though with 2 things: moving subjects and foliage processing. So if you're capturing any slight movements, it's going to be a blurry mess, and landscape shots with tons of foliage in the image will also result in a blurry mess. The 32 megapixel selfie is hit and miss. You can get good looking shots in perfect lighting, but as soon as the lighting gets challenging, colors will start becoming muted and detail gets soft. I must say that I enjoy the look of the videos here more than the photos. There is no stabilization at 4K, but if you do need to stabilize your videos, you have to settle for 1080p and you have to press a toggle for the stabilization to kick in, unlike other phones where you just shoot at 1080p and you get a stabilized video. Here, you have an extra step to do. The same applies to the 32 megapixel selfie camera.
Na lang ako sa inyo. Okay lang dahil kasi parang casual lang tignan eh.
As for the design, it's not as interesting as the Tecno Camon 20 Pro 5G's leather backing. But the satin finish on the back of this phone reflects use in certain lighting and it doesn't attract fingerprints that much. The camera hub is embossed and it's a nice seamless touch to make the back cleaner, but I think the camera module is just too big for the actual sensor. This camera layout could have been smaller, but that's just the way Infinix likes it, I guess. And it's weird that the camera cutouts are not symmetrically aligned. The railing is plastic and it's shiny and a magnet to fingerprints, but the entire build is IP53 rated, meaning it's splash and dust resistant. And the stereo speakers, although I have tested JBL tuned speakers in the past, the ones we have here are not as prominent, but the quality is on the above average side, but definitely better than those without branding. But for the display, it's a 6.67 inches AMOLED, 120Hz, and capable of up to 900 nits. Essentially, it is bright and colorful as AMOLED phones of this price range get. Although this panel is not as sharp as other 1080p phones, the colors are definitely punchy and the brightness is decent enough to make the screen sufficiently viewable anywhere. It doesn't support Dolby Vision or any sort of HDR, but I had no problems playing back that kind of video on Netflix. It's actually been a while since we've seen a competitor offer a mid-range phone that's close to the value that other companies offer like Xiaomi and Poco. But because these companies have been in the space for a while now, they know their strengths and weaknesses, what to do, how to compete, and how to get better. But with Infinix, who's just gaining ground steadily for the past few years, we can now start setting our expectations for them to hopefully hear our thoughts and improve as they release new phones every year. The affordable phone market is usually dominated by Xiaomi, but with Infinix and Tecno's arrival, it's fun to see competition again in this segment. So that's it for this one. Drop a sub or like if you feel like supporting the channel, and as always, until the next one, stay safe.